Hello, I'm Steve Fleagle, the CIO at the University of Iowa, and I'm also an alum of one of the MOR leadership programs and have found many of the elements of the program helpful over the years. I could probably spend my entire segment talking to you about the ways I've tried to apply what I've learned, but in my limited time, I'm going to focus on some of the lessons I've learned as we've been reimagining IT on our campus. So in early 2014, our Board of Regents hired a consulting firm to look for efficiencies in several areas, including IT. Because the consultants were hired and worked for the board, we had very little input into the process, mostly just providing data and explaining how we operate IT on our campus. The consultants produced high-level recommendations and savings targets. The process of getting from those recommendations to an actual plan is a longer story than I have time to tell today. But in the end, we are responsible for executing the plan to implement those recommendations. We've published details of those plans at oneit.uiowa.edu or oneit.uiowa.edu, so I'm not going to spend any time describing those activities. Instead, what I'd like to share are some of the lessons I've learned during our journey. The first thing I want to share is that this is all about change management. I know that seems obvious, but in the heat of the moment, with tight deadlines and lots of pressure, it was easy to get wrapped up in the day-to-day details that some change management opportunities were missed early on. So my advice is to step back, take a deep breath, and think about how the change management tools you have in your tool belt can be applied. Do this with your team and put a change management plan in place. This doesn't have to be a rigid, over-the-top kind of a plan, but having some idea of how you can use change management practices will be well worth your time. My experience is that everyone needs to go through a process, from understanding to accepting to constructively engaging in the change process. I know I went through my own process. It took me a while to get to the space where I could really work on this. It's hard to hurry people as they move through their own process. Some will be ready to go on day 2, and some will even be much slower or won't even get there at all. So I think it's important to acknowledge and monitor people as best you can. You may need to tell the people who are ready to go on day 2 that they're ahead and they need to help other people, or they may get frustrated waiting. Now, we all know how powerful culture is, and when you're doing something that impacts the campus broadly, you'll realize there isn't just one culture on campus, but you probably have multiple subcultures that you have to address. One thing that can really help here is the network of relationships that you and your team have. Through those relationships, you can better understand and even influence the various pockets of subcultures. So think about where those subcultures exist and figure out where you have good information about that culture and where you have influence, where you need to dig a little bit deeper to be effective. Now, every university going through some sort of efficiency effort is unique in one way or another. In our case, I understood that the only way to succeed was to undertake this effort collaboratively, to generate as much buy-in as possible. Part of being collaborative is to make sure people have a chance to provide input, or better yet, are empowered to make decisions. In order to do this, I had to make sure that I understood the constraints that were placed upon us and that I communicated those clearly, but then allow the campus IT leaders to make as many other decisions as possible. Giving that autonomy allowed for both better decisions and more buy-in. Now, the final lesson learned that I'd like to share with you today is the importance of creating a shared vision of a future state. When we first started this process, I called Brian and I asked if he could come facilitate a retreat with our IT leaders. Brian said, "Great, we should develop a vision of the future state." And I told Brian we didn't have time to undertake that. And we really didn't. But I forgot about his recommendation until much later in the process when it sort of became a problem. I think it was William Bridges that said it's hard for people to let go of the past if they can't grab onto the future. And while our efficiency efforts described a portion of our future, we hadn't really fully reimagined IT, and this became a barrier. So recently we've held a series of retreats to develop a description of our future state, and it's been very empowering for us to go through that process. We are still in the middle, and this outcome isn't certain. There are many opportunities to fail. But there have been some very positive moments, so I'd like to close with 2 stories. The first example occurred when our web hosting project, which has a goal of reducing the number of web hosting platforms, the folks from many units across campus were figuring out how they could move to a common platform when they discovered there was even a greater opportunity for more savings if they used a common cloud-based platform. So they developed a plan to move all of our Drupal sites to a cloud-based provider by the end of the summer. It will save us an additional $200,000 per year. This was their idea, and I don't think it would have happened if they hadn't been already working together. Now, the second example is that we had a team working on standardized digital signage on campus. The leader of the centrally provided service went out on maternity leave, but some of the distributed IT staff that were on the team, they volunteered to take over during her absence. Again, I don't think this would have happened, and it wouldn't have been an option if they had not have been working together. We've had other examples of staff working together to come up with creative solutions, staff from different units that didn't even know each other, realizing that they each had part of the solution and bringing those pieces together in ways that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't set the tone for collaboration amongst all the IT units on campus. We've been focused on efficiency, and we've been able to show some significant results so far. We've been able to show more than $2 million in reoccurring savings, but I think the real long-term benefit will be in the ways that we've learned to work together to develop and achieve a reimagined future state for IT on our campus. Thank you. I hope you found this helpful.